Okay guys, today's notes are on the quadratic formula. It's something you've done before. You might even remember a song to remember the quadratic formula. But today we're bringing it back because we're going to have to start using this to help us when we're factoring polynomials and we get down to having them be quadratics, especially when they don't factor nicely. So the objectives here, the student checklist, these are the things you need to be able to do. You need to be able to recite the quadratic formula. So you got to know it. It's got to be in your head. And you can use the quadratic formula to factor any quadratic equation. So that's actually a rule that you're going to want to remember. You can always use the quadratic formula anytime. There are other tricks that we can use, like double bubble, things like that don't always work. But the quadratic formula is going to work every single time. So that's why it's a rule that we need to really be good at. All right, so we're going to start off by just finding the roots of the following quadratic equations. Now, you'll notice that if you can use the AM method, you should. So the AM method is double bubble. That's the same thing. So if you want to make a note of that, AM method. Same thing as double bubble. All right, so what we're looking for here is we're looking for numbers that add to 10 and multiply to 16. So we got to find those two numbers. Two numbers that add to 10, multiply to 16. So what are some numbers that multiply to 16? We could have 4 times 4. All right, but 4 plus 4 isn't 10. We could have 16 times 1. 16 plus 1 is not 10. But if we do 8 times 2, 8 plus 2 is 10. So we can use those two numbers. And we'll do x plus 8 and x plus 2. Now, if you don't believe us, you could just refoil this out and see if you go back to having x squared plus 6 or plus 10x plus 16, which you would. But you don't have to do that because now, if you're finding the roots, now you just have two factors. So you've got x plus 8. That's one of your factors. You've got x plus 2. That's one of your factors. So you set those equal to 0 and find the roots. Easy, easy. Double bubble's a thing you haven't done in a while, though, so we're going to be practicing some of that in class. All right, now let's try doing that with B. B, if I try to double bubble this, I need numbers that add to 5 and numbers that multiply to 1. 1 can only be the product of 1 and 1. 1 plus 1 isn't 5. So we're in a jam. It means we don't have any numbers that satisfy those two qualities that we need. So we need a method that works every single time. So here we're going to use the quadratic formula, and I'm going to have you write it over here off to the side. Make sure you put the quadratic formula here. You're going to use this often. X is going to be equal to, so we're actually going to be getting the roots, not factors. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And we just plug our numbers right into that formula. Our a term is whatever the coefficient is of x squared. Our b term is whatever the coefficient is of x. And our c term is whatever the constant is on the end. So let's plug in the numbers into this formula. X equals negative. Well, instead of b, we'll use 5 because 5 is our b. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a is 1, times c is also 1. All over 2 times a. And now we just have to simplify this. So I'll take care of the discriminant. The discriminant is going to be the stuff that's underneath the radical. So let's figure that out first. We still have this negative 5 out front, plus or minus the square root of 5 squared is 25. 4 times 1 is 4, so minus 4 all over 2, because 2 times 1 is 2. Take it one next step. Now we have plus or minus the square root of 21 all over 2. 21 is not a perfect square. When you have to use the quadratic formula, it's usually because double bubble didn't work. So if double bubble doesn't work, then you're not going to get nice numbers with the quadratic formula. Now you could use the quadratic formula over here on these and you'd get really nice numbers, -8 and -2, and it would come out like this. But in this case, we couldn't double bubble, so we knew we were going to get terrible numbers. These are those terrible numbers. Now you might be saying it's a quadratic. We have 2 roots, right? Well, why do I only see one equation here? That's because of this plus minus. It's going to diverge into 2 separate roots. So we have our first root, x equals -5 plus the square root of 21 over 2. And we have another root, which is x equals -5 minus the square root of 21 over 2. And those are your 2 roots. This, if you punch it into a calculator, will be a really ugly decimal, and so will this. But you never could have guessed that these were the answers by using double bubble. You'd have to be a genius to know that these are the 2 things that multiply to 1 and add to get 5, right? So you couldn't do that. All right, so you do need the quadratic formula. I will do a second video outlining C and D, but this is going to be the only video that you have to watch through Edpuzzle. So before you come in tomorrow, make sure you do watch that other video. It's attached and it's on YouTube, but this is the one that I'm checking to see that you finished watching.